Chosen woman. This message is not for everyone. It is for the woman who has survived things she never speaks about. The woman who prays silently while carrying invisible wounds. The woman who feels God's hand on her life, but also feels exhausted from fighting battles no one else sees. If you found this message, it is not by accident. Heaven is speaking because time matters. Certain patterns, habits, and attachments that once felt harmless are now draining your spirit, weakening your discernment, and quietly shortening the destiny God designed for you. When God says stop, it is not punishment, it is protection. Some things do not kill the body immediately, but slowly destroy peace, clarity, health, and purpose. The enemy does not always come with chaos. Sometimes he comes with familiarity, comfort, nostalgia, delay, and God, in His mercy, interrupts before permanent loss occurs. Listen closely, chosen woman. These 9 things must end, not tomorrow, not when it feels easier, but now. Stop ignoring your intuition. God speaks to chosen women through intuition more than noise. His voice is rarely loud, dramatic, or chaotic. Instead, it is steady, gentle, and persistent, an inner knowing that doesn't need evidence to be real. Every time you ignore that quiet warning, you override divine guidance that was specifically designed for your protection. That uneasiness in your chest, the tightness in your throat, the sudden heaviness you feel around certain people or in certain places, those sensations are not random emotions or anxiety without cause. They are spiritual alerts. They are God's way of getting your attention before something costs you more than you can afford to lose. That recurring feeling telling you to leave, pause, speak up, or reconsider is not coincidence. It is confirmation. God does not repeat Himself because He enjoys redundancy. He repeats Himself because the message is urgent. Ignoring intuition doesn't just lead to bad decisions in relationships, finances, or opportunities. It slowly disconnects you from your spiritual hearing. Over time, when intuition is dismissed often enough, confusion begins to replace clarity. Red flags start looking normal. Danger starts feeling familiar. What once made you uncomfortable becomes something you tolerate, then accept, then defend. Chosen woman. This is how spiritual numbness begins, not through rebellion, but through repeated self-betrayal. When you silence the voice God placed inside you, you teach your spirit not to speak. And when your spirit stops speaking, your life becomes reactive instead of guided. You begin making choices based on pressure, fear, or logic alone, instead of alignment. God says stop doubting what He already confirmed within you. You do not need external validation for internal truth. Your intuition is not imagination. It is discernment sharpened by divine connection. The more you honor it, the clearer it becomes. The more you ignore it, the quieter it sounds. God is calling you back to trust what He planted inside you before the world taught you to question yourself. 2. Stop staying where you are tolerated, but not honored. Chosen woman. Environments that merely tolerate you are slowly suffocating you, even if they look safe on the surface. Tolerance is not acceptance, and it is certainly not honor. When you stay in spaces where you are only endured, you unconsciously begin to shrink yourself to survive. You speak less. You soften your truth. You over-explain your intentions. You make yourself smaller so others can remain comfortable. This is not humility, it is self-erasure. God never designed you to beg for respect, compete for acknowledgement, or overprove your worth. If you constantly feel the need to justify your presence, your value, or your boundaries, you are not where you are meant to flourish. Staying where you are undervalued slowly drains your life force. Confidence erodes quietly. Joy becomes conditional. Passion fades. You may not notice it immediately, but over time your spirit grows tired of fighting to be seen. Prolonged dishonor doesn't stay emotional. It manifests physically. stress settles into your body. Anxiety becomes a constant background noise. Fatigue lingers even after rest. In some cases, illness appears not because your body is weak, but because your soul has been ignored for too long. Your system knows when you are out of alignment, even when your mind tries to rationalize staying. Chosen woman, loyalty to places God has already outgrown for you is not noble. It is disobedience disguised as faithfulness. God says stop staying loyal to places He has already left. When His presence lifts, peace leaves with it. When favor departs, no amount of effort can replace it. You were created for environments that celebrate your light, not merely endure it. Honor doesn't require you to beg. It meets you where you are and rises to greet you. If you are constantly shrinking to fit, that space is not your assignment. It is your exit. 3. Stop romanticizing struggle. Not every hardship is holy. Not every season of pain is proof of purpose. Some struggles persist not because God is refining you, but because obedience has been delayed. Chosen woman, there is a dangerous belief that suffering automatically equals spiritual growth. While God does refine, discipline, and stretches people, He does not trap them in cycles meant to be exited. When struggle becomes your identity, you stop recognizing when grace is trying to move you forward. Romanticizing struggle makes you normalize pain that was meant to end seasons ago. You begin calling endurance strength even when the endurance is no longer required. You convince yourself that staying stuck is humility, that exhaustion is evidence of faith, and that constant hardship is a badge of honor. But survival is not the same as alignment. God never asked you to glorify pain. He asked you to trust Him enough to leave it when He opens the door. Some battles are not tests, they are warnings. Some closed doors are not delays, they are protection. When you ignore these signals, you stay fighting wars that are already over. You keep bleeding in places God already healed. Over time, struggle becomes familiar, and peace begins to feel uncomfortable because it is unfamiliar. God says stop calling survival strength when He has already prepared restoration. You do not have to suffer endlessly to prove loyalty. You do not need to remain in lack to demonstrate faith. God is not impressed by how much pain you can tolerate. He is honored by how quickly you obey when He says, "It's time to move." Chosen woman. Struggle is sometimes a passage, not a destination. If it no longer produces growth, wisdom, or clarity, it may no longer be God-ordained. Let go of the idea that pain makes you worthy. You were already chosen before the struggle ever began. Stop carrying emotional weight that is not yours. Chosen women are natural healers, listeners, nurturers, and emotional anchors. People are drawn to your presence because you make them feel seen, understood, and safe. But what begins as compassion can slowly turn into emotional captivity if you are not discerning. You were never meant to carry everyone's pain, trauma, guilt, and unresolved wounds on your back. Absorbing what does not belong to you slowly crushes your own spirit. When you constantly hold space for others without boundaries, your nervous system never rests. You replay conversations. You worry about people who refuse to change. You feel responsible for emotions you didn't create. Over time, this emotional weight becomes heavy, and you begin to feel drained even when you've done nothing physically demanding. This is not love, it is overextension. God says stop rescuing people who refuse transformation. You cannot heal someone who is committed to staying broken. Carrying someone else's emotional load does not save them, it delays their accountability. Meanwhile, it costs you peace, sleep, health, creativity, and clarity. What you carry too long will eventually demand payment from your body and spirit. Chosen woman, empathy without boundaries turns into self-neglect. You are allowed to care without carrying. You are allowed to support without sacrificing yourself. God did not anoint you to be a dumping ground for unresolved pain. He anointed you to walk in purpose, not exhaustion. When you release what was never yours to hold, you make room for your own healing, joy, and calling. God is asking you to put down weights He never asked you to lift. 5. Stop returning to what God already delivered you from. Nostalgia is dangerous when it disguises bondage. It has a way of softening memories and editing out the pain, the fear, and the damage that once made you cry out to God for escape. Chosen woman, that person, habit, mindset, or season God removed you from was not a mistake, and it was not random. It was an act of mercy. When God delivers you, it is rarely just for comfort, it is often for survival. Returning to what He freed you from, whether physically, emotionally, or mentally, reopens doors that were closed for your protection. Sometimes the return is obvious, reconnecting with someone who drained you, revisiting environments that crushed your spirit, or repeating behaviors that once enslaved you. Other times it is subtle. It happens in your thoughts. You romanticize old versions of people. You question whether leaving was necessary. You minimize the harm and magnify the good. This is how bondage re-enters, quietly, disguised as reflection or forgiveness. Chosen woman, relapse is not always visible to others. Sometimes it's internal, sometimes it's emotional. You may never go back physically, but you revisit mentally, emotionally, or spiritually. Each return weakens the boundary God established. Each glance back slows forward momentum. The past cannot be re-entered without cost, because you are no longer the same person who survived it. God says stop reopening chapters that almost destroyed you. If something required divine intervention to remove you, it was never meant to be revisited. Deliverance is not something to negotiate with. What God ended, He ended for a reason. Trust that His removal was intentional, even when loneliness or familiarity tries to convince you otherwise. 6. Stop speaking negatively over your own life. Your words are not casual sounds drifting into the air. They are agreements. They shape perception, influence direction, and reinforce belief. Chosen woman, when you constantly speak fear, lack, exhaustion, or self-condemnation over your life, you are not being realistic. You are participating in spiritual sabotage. Every repeated negative declaration becomes a contract your spirit begins to live under. God says stop agreeing with temporary pain as if it is permanent truth. Saying this is how it always is, or nothing ever works out for me, may feel like honesty, but it slowly trains your mind and spirit to expect limitation. Over time, your language builds invisible ceilings. Opportunities feel unreachable. Hope feels naive. Faith feels distant. Chosen women are especially affected by what they declare because they are spiritually sensitive and deeply connected to their inner world. What you speak does not just affect outcomes, it affects alignment. Negative speech clouds discernment, weakens expectation, and drains spiritual momentum. Even when God is moving behind the scenes, negative declarations can delay your ability to perceive or receive it. Life and death truly are in the power of the tongue. This does not mean denying pain or pretending everything is perfect. It means refusing to crown pain as final authority. You can acknowledge hardship without prophesying defeat. You can speak truth without cursing your future. God is calling you to be intentional with your words. Speak life even while healing. Speak faith even while waiting. Your voice carries weight. Use it to agree with heaven, not temporary hardship. Stop Disrespecting your rest. Burnout is not devotion, and exhaustion is not evidence of obedience. Chosen woman, God created rest as a command, not a suggestion. From the very beginning, rest was woven into divine order. When you ignore rest, you are not proving strength. You are weakening your discernment, emotional stability, and physical health. A tired spirit struggles to hear God clearly. A fatigued mind becomes reactive instead of reflective. When you are constantly drained, small problems feel overwhelming, and clarity becomes difficult to access. The enemy understands this well. That is why he targets rest. He knows that tired, chosen women are easier to confuse, discourage, and distract. God says, stop treating rest like laziness. Rest is not withdrawal. It is warfare. It is how your nervous system resets. It is how your spirit regains sensitivity. It is how wisdom resurfaces after noise. When you rest, you resist the lie that your value comes from productivity alone. Disrespecting rest often comes from feeling responsible for everything and everyone. But God never assigned you to operate without limits. Even Jesus withdrew. Even he rested. If divinity modeled rest, so must you. Chosen woman, when you honor rest, you protect your future, you sharpen your discernment, you preserve your joy. God is not asking you to do more. He is asking you to pause so you can do what truly matters with clarity and strength. Stop making decisions out of fear. Fear-based decisions lead to survival paths, not destiny paths. When fear sits on the throne of your choices, it quietly shrinks your life. Saying yes because you're afraid to lose someone, staying silent because you're afraid to offend, settling because you're afraid to wait. These decisions may feel safe in the moment, but they slowly erode self-trust and alignment. Fear convinces you that scarcity is permanent and that risk is dangerous. It whispers that waiting is foolish and that obedience will cost you too much. But fear never leads to fulfillment. It only leads to containment. God says, stop letting fear rule your decisions. Fear keeps you small, cautious, and constantly bracing for loss. Faith-based decisions expand life. They stretch capacity. They require trust beyond logic. While fear focuses on what could go wrong, faith focuses on who God is. When you choose faith, you move toward growth, even when the path is unfamiliar. Fear shortens life, not just in years, but in experience. It keeps you stuck in cycles of what if instead of movement. God did not choose you to live defensively. He chose you to live deliberately. Chosen woman, courage is not the absence of fear. It is obedience in spite of it. Every time you choose faith over fear, you reclaim authority over your life. 9. Stop delaying obedience. Delayed obedience is still disobedience. Chosen woman, God has already told you what to do, what to leave, what to change, and what to begin. The instruction was clear. The confirmation was repeated. The unease has not gone away because the assignment has not changed. Waiting for one more sign often feels spiritual, but it is frequently fear disguised as patience. Each delay costs momentum. Clarity fades. Confidence weakens. What once felt urgent begins to feel heavy. Obedience is time-sensitive because alignment is time-sensitive. God says, stop postponing the move that preserves your future. Every season has an expiration date. What was available yesterday may not remain available tomorrow. When you delay, you risk missing the window where obedience would have been easier, safer, and more supported. Obedience is not always comfortable, but it is always protective. When you move when God says move, provision follows motion. Protection follows obedience. Peace follows alignment. Chosen woman, you do not need more information. You need movement. God is waiting on your yes, not your perfection. The moment you obey, resistance breaks, clarity returns, and the next step reveals itself. Chosen woman, if this message reached you at the exact moment you needed it, it is because God is intervening. This is not a warning to frighten you. It is an invitation to choose life, peace, and alignment. This is the Woman of Light channel. If this message spoke to your spirit, subscribe so you never miss divine confirmations meant for you. And if you know, deep in your soul, that this message arrived right on time, type 11 in the comments section as a declaration that you are choosing obedience, protection, and divine blessings. Thank you for watching.